let me bring my guests now to you so that we can begin the very important discussions on NewsFile today. We will have, or we have already, Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh, Executive Director of the Ghana Center for Democratic Development, CDD-Ghana, on Skype with us. Thank you very much for joining us, Prof.
Thank you for having me.
Great. We will also have Ernest Kofi Abuchi, former Dean, Gimpa Law School. We will be speaking to the Electoral Commission as well. But here in the studio is Bright Simmons, Honorary Vice President, Imani Africa. Thank you very much for joining us, Bright.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Great. So as you know, we are dealing with two critical matters. First, it's important that you remember to observe the social distancing protocols. It's important that you don't move out of your house unless you have something essential to attend to. It is important that you are washing your hands and you are sanitizing so that everybody will be safe. If you have any issues, remember to call the hotlines, 112. If you want to make a report about a situation you don't feel well or something like that. But if it's about the food you need or something else about what is going on and the lockdown measures, you can call the hotline 311 and you will be attended to. But this morning, we are asking, why is the Electoral Commission set to compile voters registration, a voters register, even in this lockdown? That's what it has started talking about. But what happens if December 7 is disrupted by the pandemic? What are the options, so to speak, constitutionally, legally, to the country? You may say that is an academic argument or discussion, but it is important. We ought to be proactive. America has gone beyond this because they also have elections coming up. And second, a scandal that is akin to the Airbus scandal has led to the tour boss resigning. President has accepted his resignation. Should that be the end of the story? That's a question we are asking. What do the allegations in the courts in the US look like? How do we prevent a similar situation if this represents the truth during this period? Remember that that transaction took place during Dumso. You may say that was another pandemic, so to speak, epidemic. How do we prevent a similar thing from happening now? Did Ghana not lose money in this? We will be dealing with these two issues this morning. But let's start from the Electoral Commission. And let's hear Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante of the CDD on the EC thinking about alternatives. And then the EC's Dr. Srebo Kwaku on why they are talking about a new register even in this lockdown. The majority leader will also say something. Listen to them.
Yes, I think many lawyers, administrative, constitutional lawyers, are looking at the options. I think in parliamentary systems around the world, it's probably easier to postpone elections. Ours makes the tenure of the president, fixed. There is really no wiggle room within the constitution to alter that. Even if you go with Article 298, which is a residual powers that are given to Parliament, it might be interpreted to be inconsistent with the Constitution. So, people have proposed that maybe there's a pathway through Article 113 where a dissolved Parliament is actually recalled, and then they say with 3 months where the speaker is acting president, to hold an election with the chance. Now, this is something we've not explored, and it might require a Supreme Court interpretation, or something might change it. And so in all of this, I think it's just prudent for everybody, state entities, for governments, for stakeholders, media, everybody to think ahead at scenario planning. You might not need it, but you just want to be prepared so that you don't hit a constitutional crisis or a governance crisis, and add to the problems of dealing with a public health situation like we.
As far as the commission is concerned, we are saying that we can only ensure credible register with a new register.
Okay, but that brings back my question, and this is relevant, if you may. In the midst of the uncertainties brought on by COVID-19, nobody knows when this is going to pass. Is the EC at least now reconsidering that and saying, in a push come to shove, we will have to shelve this and just do limited? Is that something you're considering?
Then can I answer the question?
Please do.
Then the phase of the COVID-19, are you also thinking of not having election 2020?
I don't know. I mean, it's something that the Electoral Commission has to.
Anybody in the Electoral Commission, knowing the resources that we have, knowing the situation of the register, will go for a new credible.
I totally get that, but I don't know if you can answer me. Is there a thinking around what if it's not possible?
And that would defeat our argument that if you have to have credible election 2020, we need a new register.
Okay, but you don't have control over COVID-19. So what if this goes all the way to September?
Then the next question is, are you also thinking of that if COVID doesn't allow, we will not have the election too?
But that question is based on the premise that you cannot have the December elections without a new voters register. That's the premise that you are basing that question on. But that premise cannot be.
The Electoral Commission knows and think that there should be a new credible register before we go to the election.
My considered opinion is too early to call for the suspension of the general elections. The MPP primaries is even hovering around. If it is possible to conduct the MPP primaries, it should be possible to conduct the general elections. Let's see how it plays out. And I wouldn't want at this stage in our national life to say that we should suspend the national elections. I think it is premature. Let's see how events play out. We're hoping that by the measures that we are putting in place, including the laws that Parliament has fashioned, the restrictions bill, the coronavirus trust funds, and the statement from the Minister responsible for finance, how the nation is preparing itself to combat the disease. Let's see what the combined efforts jointly produce. For now, anybody talking about, and December 7th is more than 7 months away. So it's, in my considered opinion, it is premature at this stage.
Right. So you have heard the various views as canvassed there, and we would like to get to the Electoral Commission as quickly as possible for them to explain a number of things for us. I am interested, for example, first to know if the Electoral Commission is granted, as it were, exemption and to be an essential service provider to continue with its business in the meantime, because the Electoral Commission is organizing meetings for, as it calls it, National Planning Meeting and Key Trainers Training Workshop in Pram on the 24th and the 29th of April to prepare and plan for the forthcoming registration of voters exercise. All regional directors are required to attend and also to submit regional reports on the district level elections. The meeting is supposed to be attended by commissioners, headquarters directors, regional directors, deputy regional directors, deputy headquarters directors, and some headquarters senior officers, and we want to know just a few things about what is going on, and more particularly whether or not it has been advised by the experts, doctors, that it is okay to begin to even think about doing a new voters register in these times. Right.
Yes.
Welcome once again.
Thank you.
Right. So you have heard the Electoral Commission.
Yes.
It is not making a suggestion. It is informing you that I am ready to do this.
Yes.
And as I just indicated, it is actually beginning meetings to train key trainers for this purpose. The pandemic doesn't mean that life has come to an end. So why is a section of civil society unhappy that the EC would even think about doing a voters registration exercise?
Thank you, Samson. We have about 10 reasons. The first is that we are in a moment of essentialism, where everyone, regardless of what they do, must restructure the activities as to what is most essential and leave the ones that are most essential relatively unchanged, and the things that are not as essential sufficiently change enough to conform to the new guidelines, social distancing, ban on public gatherings, etc. When we say something is essential, we don't necessarily mean only that it's important. A lot of things are important. We mean that it is important, but also it is of such a nature that it's not sufficiently easy. I don't even say sufficiently easy. It's not easy to restructure it to conform to the new guidelines. So essential is not just your colloquial essential. It has taken on a specific type of meaning. So when we close schools down, we say that the universities should all empty, people should leave primary schools and go home. And when we say that churches should close, those of you that are spiritual, and mosques should close, it's not because they are not essential in the colloquial meaning of the word. It's because the nature of the epidemic is such that they must be restructured. When you take the electoral process as an entire framework, an end-to-end framework, there are things that are essential for constitutional reasons, for political stability reasons, etc. And there are things that are not so essential. One of the most essential elements of that end-to-end framework is the voting itself. It's time-bound. It must happen within 4 months or not later than 4 months before the transition, and that transition is fixed for 7th January. Given that context, we must look at all the activities within the chain that will get us to that timeline and say which of them are not essential enough that it can be restructured. Registration, I'm sorry to say, is not one of the most essential elements of that chain. Even exhibition, certification, nomination are more essential. Without them, you can't even have the elections. When it comes to registration, the law is quite clear that the EC has significant discretion in terms of how it revises the register, to the point where some have argued that it should even stop the periodic mass registrations and move into a continuous registration model, where people can go into the EC district offices and register continuously until the 42-day barrier prevents any further registration before nominations are filed. So, in simple terms, our first point is that when it comes to all the critical elements in the chain leading to the elections, the registration is the one for which we have the greatest discretion. Particularly also, where if you decided not to do the registration at all, and this is plan A, let's say because of the the grave situation that faces, and we will expound on that in subsequent submissions. If we decide we're not going to do it at all, how many voters are going to be affected, and how would that affect the legitimacy of the election? 7%. Why 7%? Because you have about 17 million on the register. Every limited registration will add 1.2 million. If you don't do any registration at all, 93%, at the very least, 90% of people can still vote. Legitimacy is a matter of degree. So eliminating the registration does not really undermine the election. Whereas eliminating some of the other activities, particularly the ones that ensure that we have a free and fair election, and there's one man, one vote, or one woman, one vote, exhibitions, education, the rest are more important. So the EC must divert its attention to the most essential elements of the electoral chain. That's our first point. Our second point is that if you take the nature of the epidemic and the current rules around how it should be managed worldwide, WHO rules, rules of the CDC in Atlanta and others that are considered of global repute, you will need to implement a registration process that takes that into account. That means that the 44-day timeline will have to be at least doubled to be really safe. Let's even say we only increase it by 50%. Why do we need to do that? Because you need to space out the queues. Every time somebody comes and put their fingernails on the machines, you need to sanitize them, etc., etc. Now, all those procedures will lengthen the time of the registration. By our calculation, the minimum sensible time you need to allocate to adjust for all these procedures is 70 days. That is very important. The third is that the character of the registration process, if you've studied it carefully, even as an anthropological observer just looking, is such that it is designed to transmit disease. When you go there and you put your finger on that machine, there is research, including one very famous one that is used worldwide by Jan Jacobs and Mark van Rast, which is shown that putting your finger on these scanners, and they were studied in the context of visa biometric applications, where you go to an embassy registration center and you have to do that. And they studied it very extensively. And they came to the conclusion that it alleviates the risk of transmission of rotaviruses, Lassa virus, all manner of adenoviruses, all manner of funny viruses significantly. So the process itself is quite dangerous. That leads us to the fourth point, which is that, and this is a technical point, and in some ways it's quite fascinating. The process of trying to mitigate that creates another problem. You have to use 75%, 70%, some even recommend 85% alcohol-based sanitizers to do the sanitization of the devices every time somebody does the registration. Research establishes that alcohol degrades the fingerprint scanner. So we have a possibility of heightened interruptions due to the fact that we are using too much alcohol to deface the scanners. Remember, these are supposed to be super sensitive devices. Now, every time somebody comes and puts their fingers there, you take it off, you wipe it off. The next person comes, you take it off, you wipe it off. You are degrading the machines, which may cause interruptions. The fifth point is that the EC is currently subject to legal challenges. There are people in court saying that they will not allow them to deny voters or prospective voters the use of the voter ID card. What does the research tell us over the last couple of years? About 60% on average of voters that are registering use the voter ID card as their primary means of identification. In fact, we have now gone ahead and eliminated baptismal certificate and all manner of things, which in some ways are actually quite more robust than the guarantor forms. But that position that they will not allow the old voter ID cards is extremely suspect, given the Zanito case and other cases that our courts have shown that they are maximalist when it comes to the issue of the right to vote. Most legal experts that I have spoken to give the chances of success that the court might disagree with the EC at above 60%. That will additionally create problems because the EC is trying to circumvent a fundamental problem. And that is that for those that believe that the register has a problem, you cannot allow people that are already on the register simply to go and re-register. Then what is the point? This is not to talk about the voting system and this technology. I'm talking about those people that have a concern about the register's quality. If I can use my old voter ID card and go and register, then that whole point is defeated. So those that support the register cannot abide a disagreement by the court. The next issue is that we are 8 months behind schedule, which people don't realize. In the last time that we did a full end-to-end re-architecture or re-architecting of our voting system, we completed procurement in October of the year before, 2011. We now have a situation where we have not completed all procurement activities and we are almost in May. That time they finished in October of the year before. And then they had all that time to plan, to do their piloting, etc. That has not been done. That is our 8th point. We have not done the testing procedures on the field that genuinely should constitute a user acceptance testing. The user acceptance testing that the EC has gone ahead and approved is one of the most incompetent decisions any public authority in this country should be allowed to get away with. Because field testing has always been integral to how you do user acceptance when a new machine or a new system, technological system, is brought to use. Okay. Because of all the barriers, those are limited. I'll rush through the remaining 3 issues. 1 or 8. If the situation was such that we start to recover, the mechanism of reopening follow international procedures for which an election process that lasts as much as 2.5 months, by our calculation, will completely distract us from. Okay. Imagine an attempt for political party members, and you're not going to stop them bashing their members and the rest. At the same time, you are doing vaccination. Because you have to do vaccination, therapeutics. You are trying to do serological surveys. All of those things will greatly be inconvenienced if our focus and attention as a country is diverted to this. Can I rush through my last 2 quickly? Okay. The last 2 points is about the economic implications, as well as the fact that, and that is the last point, we now have to re-examine the EC's case why it cannot use the existing register. Don't forget, a lot of organizations like Imani and the rest have published a lot of things. I would say 99% of people have not read them at all. They don't have time. But now that the EC says we cannot do anything without a new register, we must now go back and re-prosecute and re-litigate all those issues again. Why? Because the EC gives us specific technical reasons. They did not give us constitutional reasons why they cannot do what they use the old register. They give us technical reasons. Luckily or unfortunately for us, either way, depending on how you look at it, no member of the 19-member commission, including the commissioners and other members, none of them make software or build hardware. So any technical decision that they make is subject to evaluation by other stakeholders, including the Ghana Chamber of Technology and other organizations in Ghana, none of whom have been consulted in these matters. Now the argument is, we have said, looking at the data that exists, that the register that we have today is extremely fit for purpose. We've shown records from the Ministry of Finance, we've shown records from Parliament, records from the Auditor General, that shows that the EC has continued to buy equipment since 2016, done a complete refurbishment, and refurbishment is not repairing. That is basically almost returning to new. Since 2016. In 2016, they completely refurbished the systems. In 2018, they replaced the majority of all the devices, and for that reason, we have one of the best biometric systems. Given that context, that debate must be had. Because if the EC says technically that election cannot be held, people must question them. And if by some reason, the people that technically are responsible for managing the elections directly say they don't have the competence to use the existing system, they should step aside by resigning. The EC should publish an application for, an invitation for new applicants. They should go and run it and use the existing register. Okay. And the last point. That was the last. You have addressed it. Thank you. All right. So, Professor H.K.C. Prempeh, now, these arguments that Bright Simmons put forward, some will say some of them are not new, and because Imani, CDD, all of you belong to the almost 24 of civil society organizations that did your own research and came to the conclusion that we didn't need a new register to be able to have the elections. But a senior advocate of the Supreme Court of Ghana, a member of the Council of State, who has the opportunity to advise the president, Sam Okudzeto, says, our cases of the coronavirus is not as dramatic as it is in many countries, which means that we only have few pockets in the 2 big municipalities and few of the smaller ones. So since the lockdown is not the whole of Ghana, the EC should start the registration in areas where there is no lockdown. Why is this not feasible?
Fortunately, we have a technical challenge with your sound, and I must welcome Kofi Abochi also onto the show. But we are trying to, fix Professor Kwesi Prempe's, connection, and we'll bring him on. Also on the phone is the EC's Director of Electoral Services, Dr. Srebo Kweku. Dr. Kweku, if you can hear me, what do you make of the criticism, the avalanche of criticism that you are coming up against after you made it public that you are intent, on going on with organizing a new register?
Good morning, my brother Samson, and my greetings to Ghanaians and the listeners. What we have been saying is that, looking at the current register that we have, we will prefer compiling a new voters register. And this pandemic has come in. We are so sensitive to what is happening around us. That's why in all my deliberations I've been mentioning that we are in consultation with health experts and other stakeholders. There's no way we will rush Ghanaians into the pandemic as if Electoral Commission we are living outside the group. As far as our programs are concerned, if the pandemic were to go by the next 1 or 2 months, we are still sure that we can compile the new register without any inhibition. I'm just watching you, and my friend Simmons was saying that registration is not a critical activity. I don't know whether I didn't get him right, but I think that is the foundation of an election. You can't go to an election without credible register. I'm not a lawyer, but if you look at Article 42 of the Constitution, it is there. And also to avert your mind back, in 1996, we had done limited registration. We have completed then 1 man, 10 a day. Samson, a lawyer, I believe you remember the story.
Right.
The man came and he said that we have already finished with the limited registration. We did a major compilation in 95. Then we did a limited registration. The man went to Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said we should register him. So registration is a fundamental human right that we cannot take it away from anybody. So if, God willing, the pandemic subsides the next 2 months, we can comfortably go through the limited registration. The next one is what are the other options in case?
Okay, before we go to the other options, can I canvass a couple of the points he made to you so we can get your reaction?
Okay.
You are talking about limited registration and the fact that we have a number of Ghanaians who have now qualified to be registered to vote, and that's a constitutional right. Therefore, you ought to do it. If you don't, you may face legal suits. That's what you say, right?
Exactly.
How many people are you expecting to register? What's your estimate?
But our estimation, we are projecting around 1.2.
1.2 million
if we are
new voters. Okay. The other question.
Bear in mind that the limited registration does not cover only those who have turned 18.
All right.
You may have people who, as I speak to you, I know somebody who is in Ghana. He came from outside and he wants to contest as a parliamentary candidate. And he also needs to. So we have a lot of people who are not just people who have turned 18. There are other people who are some people who are in Ghana who have never registered, but now they want to register.
All right. So the question is, and he refers to continuous registration, which is part of your law, that it ought to be possible for any Ghanaian to get up any day once they are 18 years and of sound mind to walk into any EC office and to be registered to vote. What happened to the continuous registration?
Thank you very much. I can't quote the exact, but in CI91, it is there. But the CI91 says that we should agree with the political parties to determine the modalities for the continuous registration. We met the political parties, and you know, in Ghana, the political parties always want to be part of any of our activities. So they are saying that if we have to go by the continuous registration, that we do it as and when anybody comes. It will mean that we also have to have permanent agents at our office, and they cannot afford that. And that is the I don't know, the spanner, whatever it is in our way. Because if they are saying, and because of that, it was agreed that once a while you can do so-called limited registration, that will face some days, but it really boils down to the limited issue that we are talking about.
You are saying
but the one we're talking of,
you are saying that you have a law, and yet the political party's decision trumps the law.
The law says that we should agree with them to come out with the modality. So it's not that one. It's not for the registration. The rest, we don't have any negotiation.
There are many times you are unable to agree with the political parties, and yet once you make a decision that what you ought to do is sound, you go ahead and you keep telling us about your independence. We are not in normal times. Are you not able to proceed?
If majority of them are at one side, we can easily go with them. But this one saying that the CI specifically says that we should agree with the political party with the modality. So if majority of them are agreeing with that, we will do it. But if all of them are saying no, the law says that we should agree with them with the modality.
Okay.
The other issues, we do it and they come in. But this one specifically, the law mentions that we should agree with them with the majority. So if ever, for example, we spread 4 of them, and 3 of them are saying do it this way, and one says no, we can go ahead with the 3. But if all of them were saying that they can't give us permanent agents. So that is a different issue.
Did I hear you suggest that you are not certain that you intend to do this process?
Well, yeah, what I wanted to say is that our main focus is that if the pandemic gives us opportunity, because as I said, we have been talking to the health experts and the other stakeholders. If in 2 months time it goes down, that we argue that it's okay or it's safe for us, we can go ahead. And in view of that, we are procuring a lot of PPEs and the rest, so that if it subsides and we all agree that it has subsided, we are buying a lot of PPEs for our staff. We will do the sanitation. No, if you, I think 4 days ago, South Korea had an election, and if you monitored it, they use a lot of spacing or whatever. But what we are saying that for
there are countries that have postponed their elections in the lockdown.
Yes,
even in Africa.
So if it subsides, the Electoral Commission is not taking decisions in isolation. We are in consultation with health experts and the rest. So we will not take a decision when they have not been advised to do so.
Right.
And we want everybody to know that it's not that we are insensitive to the price. Because I myself will not be comfortable, any of my regions or myself, being infested. You understand? So we are taking all the precautions that we want to take. But the case is that if in 2 months' time, it will be stress on us, but we can still compare the register. If that one fails, then people we will look at the we have done a lot of research work, and we have some paper to that effect.
Okay.
And what we are saying in that case, we may use the old register, but that also means that we need to do some cleaning. We need to do some validation.
Okay, so you just preempted my next question there. You are saying that there's a possibility you will use the present register.
And with some validation, cleaning, and the rest. And that will also mean maybe amending the law. Because if you are to do the validation, what it will mean is that it should be compulsory exhibition. If you don't go for validation, your name should be deleted. And in that case, we will have to amend the law. So, and if you are talking of doing the validation, to mean that people will also come in, so human contact will still be there.
We are not in normal times, as you may have heard the president say.
Yes.
So why are you not rather focusing on this alternative?
Yes, I'm saying that if the alternative also means limited registration and validation, which also brings human contact, right? So there's no way, whether new or old, you can avoid human contact.
I see. Okay, so just hold on briefly. We are having a discussion for a while. I think Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh's connection is good now. The Honorable Samuel Okudzeto said that our cases of the coronavirus is not as dramatic as it is in many countries, which means that we only have few pockets in the 2 big municipalities and few of the smaller ones. So since the lockdown is not the whole of Ghana, the EC should start the registration in areas where there is no lockdown. What do you say?
Well, I think let's take that argument. Then, of course, you have to turn complete registration eventually to areas that are affected by lockdown. Otherwise, you'll be treating one sectors differently and unconstitutionally. Right? So if you start from a few areas or areas where there's potentially no lockdown, once you are done with those areas, what you do, you come to Accra and Kenya and Kumasi, and what do you do there? If the situation is still same as it is, then of course you would meet difficulty which might actually rise to constitutional.
Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh, my apologies once again. Thank you for your patience. We will still have to rectify the difficulty and challenge we have with your line, and then we will have you back to join the discussion. But if I may put that same question to Kofi Abochi, what will you say?
Hello?
Hello. Yes, hold on. I'm talking to Kofi Abochi. Life must not come to a halt. Shouldn't the EC be doing what Samuel Okudzeto is proposing?
Can you please just repeat what the Honorable Okudzeto said?
Did you ask me to read it back to you?
Yes. If you can repeat what the Honorable Okudzeto said.
So this is what he says. Our cases of the coronavirus is not as dramatic as it is in many countries, which means that we only have few pockets in the 2 big municipalities and few of the smaller ones. So since the lockdown is not the whole of Ghana, the EC should start the registration in areas where there is no lockdown.
Well, I respect the Honorable Samuel Okudzeto a lot and his positions, and I can understand why he's saying that. Probably he's asking us to put ourselves in context. I will, however, again, from a very layman's perspective, but as someone who's following the news, that it appears that the pandemic is doing a global tour. It's moved from Asia, went to Europe. It moved from Europe, it went to the US. The projection or the prognosis of the WHO, as I monitored yesterday, is that Africa is the next epicenter. That is a sobering prognosis. And if that is the case, what it means is that we should all brace ourselves for it. Bracing ourselves for it should imply that we should take preventative steps as opposed to steps that may endanger us in some way or the other. I think that in the minimum, civic duty should not endanger anybody. And so if the performance of a civic responsibility, like registering yourself for an election or upcoming election, would have medical public health consequences, I would rather we take preventative steps rather than taking the risky step of.
Can I address the question?
And so, yes, I respect the position as I indicated. I would hope that we follow the science. The science and data indicates at the moment that we are the next front line, or we may be the next front line, and we do pray against that. But until we cross the barrier, until we cross the line where we are declared sufficiently safe, and indeed, let's be honest, a number of steps have been taken by governments to ensure that we are all safe. We've all been asked to stay at home. our economy is in dire strait or dire consequence. The uncertainties are all over. Nobody really knows when this is going to end. Businesses are on the line. There are a lot of sacrifices that we've already made. And I think to reverse that by some step that may have consequence for our public health and our country as a whole, albeit that is an important step by way of election. To reverse that, I think we should rather do that slowly. So I respect the position, but as someone who's not a doctor or a public health official, I do not speak with the benefit of authority, but monitoring the news, I think my indication is if we are the next front line, if we are the next epicenter, I would rather we err on the side of caution and rather be careful. But again, that is not to say, and if you allow me to just weigh in on the question of the Electoral Commission's position on this. The Electoral Commission, first of all, has a time difficulty. I think we should all understand that. It has a time difficulty because it has a constitutional mandate to hold elections not earlier than 4 months to the vacancy of positions and not later than 1 month to the expiration of those terms. That constitutional position incumbent to the EC appears not to have any alternative around it. And so that's the difficulty that the EC has. The only alternative the EC appears to have is the alternative of postponing parliamentary elections. So the Constitution speaks about the possibility of postponing parliamentary elections if Parliament is dissolved, but for emergency reasons there are no elections. Parliament can have its election any time the dissolution is over. The Constitution mentions that. Okay. However, it doesn't say anything.
That's a major part. That's a major part of the discussion we will have shortly. But what do you think, from your reading of the Electoral Commission's position? Having heard Dr. Sribokweku this morning, he suggests that all they are doing is planning, preparing, in the hope that the pandemic will be over in Ghana in the next 2 months. So they are buying PPEs, among others. What is wrong in planning and hoping that in 2 months' time, this will all be over and then they can get to do their work?
Absolutely nothing wrong in planning. On the contrary, it is good management and good governance to plan. And so the position of the EC at this stage is absolutely faultless. They can plan, and mind you, the question of the compilation of electoral register, the cleaning of the electoral register, and the general management of elections in Ghana is the mandate of the EC. The Constitution requires of them, therefore, to put in place the pre-electoral planning and, of course, the post-electoral mopping up. And so there's nothing wrong, absolutely nothing wrong. It's very difficult to fault the EC on this. Again, if the projections are that this will be over in 2 months, and I do not have the data nor the know-how in this regard, if the projection is that this is going to end in 2 months, then of course, again, it makes sense that the EC should be in preparation and that their preparation should get them ready at the time when all this is over. It's important, again, as I mentioned earlier, that we recognize the fact that the EC has a time difficulty. The time difficulty is that the EC has to work with a certain electoral timeline. And when this is shifted, it has a certain seismic effect as far as our governance is concerned. It affects the entire governance paradigm, and a number of things or consequences may kick in. And so it's okay for the EC to remain sensitive to this and to plan in accordance with that in a manner that reflects the constitutional mandate or requirements incumbent on the EC. So to your question, whether there's anything wrong, with planning, there's absolutely nothing wrong at all. If you have become familiar of the evidence as presented by,
groups including Imani, and I'm talking about almost 18 civil society organizations that came together, also presented their research and said that it is possible for elections to be held using the old register, tweaking it somewhat, but not necessarily setting up a new system. The EC had planned to commence the process this month. It is not able to do so this month. It is obviously not able to do so next month. Would you rather in the face of the alternative and the evidence to the contrary, to the position of the EC that only a new register will work, that they should be focusing, rather planning on fixing the register to be used rather than compiling a new one, which takes a lot of time, as you have indicated.
In view of the fact that elections in Ghana have been characterized by constant disputations, as long as I remember, when the first election was held in Ghana and the NPP at the time rejected the election, the result altogether, and wrote the stolen verdict, which probably is the most famous political document in Ghana, if you ask me at this stage. And since then, governments after governments, elections after elections, opposing parties in particular have rejected the results and the outcome. In view of this, and given the structures and the collaborative institutions that have been established around elections in Ghana, Inter-Party Advisory Committee, and all these collaborative entities within the political actors, the space of political actors in Ghana, it is important that the EC engages. What Imani has presented and what the group or the panoply of civil society have put together, it is important that the EC interrogates this and engages these. If there are responses, we need to have cogent responses that either accepts or rejects these. I think so far what I hear, it seems, is that it's been largely disputed. I mean, they're largely rejected without much interrogation. But it's important that whatever voters register is compiled or created must meet the threshold of acceptance by key political actors, be it the political parties and even civil society and all other interested stakeholders. I think what you're suggesting, and I overheard the Director of Elections say that it's an alternative that is going to be considered. I think it's a good one, and I'm quite encouraged to hear that he's actually mentioned the fact that there is an alternative. And so it is not one-off position that has been adopted, take it or leave it, that there is an alternative position. I think it's also important for us to remember that he mentioned something which is also important, which is also true, that should they adopt even the alternative, the consequences of COVID-19 on this is not going to be entirely lost on that process as well. In fact, if you ask me, that process which he mentioned has almost the same salutary effect as conducting a new register, in the sense of it requires or is going to require that virtually all of us go back through the process to validate our names. So whether you are a registered voter or you're a new voter, all of us have to go there. And if you do not go there, there is an automatic default position. And that automatic default position is that you get deregistered, which is even more dangerous for many people.
No,
and so
I don't think we may need to get back on that. If you don't go through the process of validation, you potentially may lose your right to vote. Not that you would have lost your right to vote. Because if anything had happened to you during the process, you would not know unless you had gone to do the validation.
That's exactly the point. That's exactly the point. So that uncertainty, which I would not want to exercise, that uncertainty of not knowing whether I have been deregistered by the mere fact that I wasn't there to validate a few questions or a few things surrounding my data, would mean that I will have to go. Now, in the context of COVID-19, you have this consequence of the same issue of congestion, because the key factor of the interventions that have been taken by government is to decongest the metropolis or the places where we have had a lockdown established. And so, if all of us have to go, and mind you, we do not have to forget the fact that one of the key dangers of this disease and the pandemic is the uncertainties of the mode of transmission. The WHO and the experts keep learning new modes of transmission, from people being together to people merely breathing to people shaking hands and having contact to people touching surfaces. New things are emerging every day, and in the midst of this uncertainty, the last mode by which anybody would want to be contaminated will be through the performance of a civic duty, such as registering yourself for an election. So it's a dangerous scenario we have at the moment. And I sympathize with the EC in light of the obvious constitutional difficulties that they have because of the time frames that are set. However, in balancing this I would argue that ultimately the pandemic, national emergencies that are put in place, together with a minimum exemption scenario that is given to Parliament, I would argue that the EC's constitutional mandate per time is not carved in stone, for which we will have to brace all these dangers and still say somehow that would compel people to go through the process. And therefore, if you don't go through the process,
hold on for me briefly. Dr. Sribo Kwaku, I was interested in finding out, as you plan the meetings and training of trainers that you are going to hold, are you exempted? Are you an exempted service according to the Imposition of Restrictions Act?
What I know is that some of us have been given passes that allows us to move.
No, my question is, the Imposition of Restrictions Act, IRA, provides for a list of institutions or professionals that are exempt from the lockdown and the activities that, the measures that have been taken. You are not exempt. That's what you're saying. But you are saying that some of you have passes. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Okay, so how are you going to navigate that? Once you are not an exempt service, you'll be breaking the law if you proceed. Dr. Sribo, kindly turn off the volume on the radio set for me. Kindly turn it off for me, and let's see if we can. Yes.
What I'm saying is that some of us have performed critical activities, so we have been given passes that allow us to move.
But the substantive question is, you have not been classified as an exempt service, so you cannot be going to work. You must stay home. If you did, and as you have done by calling for a meeting to start training your people, you'll be violating the law and you will be arrested and prosecuted. No. Do you recognize that?
No, that's what I'm saying, that those who are involved have special passes, so that allows them to move.
Okay. I will return to you. I will return to you in a bit because Bright Simmons has a couple of questions and clarity on some of the issues that you have stated. You have taken on. But let's get to Professor Kwesi Prempeh now. Thank you once again, and thank you very much for your patience, Professor Kwesi Prempeh.
Thank you very much for all the efforts.
Great.
Samson.
Right. So, what do you say about? You were already making a point, but if you have heard your colleague and friend Akoto Ampao, he says that it is a mark of leadership for the EC to pull out of the present trajectory and find the best possible alternative solution to organizing the election.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think one point that needs to be made is that compilation of a new record at this time is not constitutionally required. We have a register, a current register, that has not been adjudged or determined without credibility, not by the people of Ghana, not by the political parties, not by a court of law. The conclusion that the EC has reached, that the current register will not produce federal elections, It's unfortunately a conclusion entirely of EC's own, right? Because we have had in recent years elections conducted on the basis of this register. The outcomes of which have not been rejected or been impeached by the people of Ghana, by the political parties, or by the law. So as far as we are all concerned, we do have a currently constitutionally compliant record. So the issue then becomes, why is the EC walking us into a path that could lead us into a constitutional quagmire when it is totally avoidable, right? So, and I think that is the point that my good friend Papa was making. That in a period such as this, where all manner of very important state activities have had to be modified, Parliament is not sitting regularly, if at all. The courts have made modifications in their schedule. Education is on hold. All of these are very important activities that have to run the state. But because of the nature of the season we're in, we've had to make trade-offs. So the EC is also called upon make appropriate trade-offs. And here is where the issue of which of the things on its normal calendar of activities in the election can it modify and still remain constitutionally compliant. As far as I know, EC cannot do anything about some dates, right? The last possible date we must have an election is December 7th. That is constitutionally bounded, right? But you then have to look at the other activities which are optional, which can we modify, and all of that. And at this point, completion of a new register is completely optional. Because we do have, as I said, currently a constitutionally compliant register. It is credible because it has not been adjusted otherwise, it has not been determined otherwise by parties, by the people of Ghana, by a court. So where is this idea that the only way you can deliver a credible election is to do an entirely new register, especially these times? So the idea, the suggestion by my good friend and colleague Samson in his piece, which is that modification of the calendar and the activities on the calendar, such that some limited registration is done to update the current register, I think makes the most sense. And also, I think the EC makes its position even more difficult to accept when it insists on certain identification documents that, in the present circumstances, would mean that all of us, all the millions of us who currently have a form of identification that has not also been addressed to be legitimate, will now have to go through the process of all the new registers. So it is just going to complicate this whole process in this period. This not the season for looking for ideal solutions.
But the EC tells you
this is not good enough. is good enough.
You may say that no court and Ghanaians have also not adjudged the current register to be as bad as the EC says. But the EC is the body that you have appointed. You have given your trust as the professionals to do your work for you. If they have come to that judgment and tell you that if you try using this old register, we'll have difficulty on our hands, why not believe them? Again, they also say that even by going by the alternative that the CDD puts forward, like you say, there will be the need for limited registration. That is still doing what perhaps we should not be doing under the present circumstances in the pandemic virus, the virus pandemic. And then there will be the need for validation. He says all of these activities practically bring us back to the same situation. We are better off doing a new register.
Well, on the question of the EC's mandate and role, nobody seeks to take that up from them. The EC, when it conducts registration and when it conducts elections for us, it does not conduct them for the EC. The EC doesn't conduct voter registration for the EC. It doesn't conduct elections for the EC. It conducts it for the people of Ghana, who participate in the process, for candidates, and in order to vindicate our constitutional right to vote and to be registered to vote. So the EC alone cannot stand alone apart from the people, apart from the political parties, apart from the courts of law, and say, no matter what you think, we have come to a judgment that this register is not credible. Credibility in this context is not a technical issue. It is very, very deeply a political, social issue. Because those legitimacy of the government system that we're running. If we have not impeached the credibility of the outcomes of the elections conducted with this register, if all of the major stakeholders who have raised questions about credibility have not, then where does the EC get the standing to say, notwithstanding that everything is legitimate, is credible? We technically have come to a decision that the role is not credible. The second argument about limited registration would create the same certainly does not hold, because that is exactly why it's called limited registration. I would not have to go and queue to vote again. I already have my voter's card. Its legitimacy has not been peaked. It's only new voters, people who want to get on the roll for the first time. So the numbers will cut down across the country considerably, which will make it manageable, practicing social distancing rules and giving the time constraints for the EC to actually do that.
Right. Now, wearing your legal cap as a teacher of the law, can you help us with some clarity on this matter? The Imposition of Restrictions Act 2020 does not make the EC an exempt institution. The EC, from the 24th of this month through to the 29th, it is beginning the training of trainers, bringing all 8 officers across the country together to do the planning that it intends to do. Dr. Sribo Okwaku said some of them have passes that allow them movement. Can they congregate? Can they go to the office and work without being specifically exempted?
Well, I mean, even if they couldn't do current, I mean, I think that is not much of a big problem for me, because it can be so easily cured by just, issuing another executive instrument, including them, right? I think that still doesn't solve the problem. I don't want us to get to a point where we give politicians ideas about, okay, then just make the an essential. It doesn't solve the problem. It just easy to go to work.
Okay.
Right? So it's not just purely a legal issue. These are practical constraints that we are all facing. I'm doing this interview from my home, not by choice. It's because circumstances have created a situation where I can't be a student. All of us have made sacrifices and modifications, including constitutional bodies who are vital to the functioning of our democracy.
Right.
Just as the EC is. So telling the EC that you too must modifications, as long as you don't violate the Constitution and you don't push the Constitution to its limits, make modifications that you can live with, that we can all live with. That is not asking too much. All right.
Okay. So, Mr. Abochi, if I can have you in a minute on this question, can they proceed as they intend to by organizing these meetings without being specifically exempted?
I would think that they would be breaching the law. I think the law has clearly exempted certain institutions, and those institutions that have been exempted are exempted by law per se. Those institutions don't even need additional passes because the law itself has exempted them. Any other body who is not in there must specifically be granted a pass. Now, the point is, once the EC is not there, the fact that members of the EC have passes of itself still undermines the function of credibility of the work, because ultimately what this will mean is that you're going to be operating in a haphazard manner. If you have a pass as a staff, you can go out there and do something. If you do not have a pass, then we have to probably find an alternative way of getting you to do the work without violating the law, so to speak.
Okay.
So I think unless and until you have an institutional pass to embark on a nationwide activity institutionally would appear to be acting in a complicit manner vis-a-vis the violation of the law. And I think for a high-level institution like the EC, I would hope that they would do the needful. Okay. As Prof. Prempe mentioned, it can be rectified or it can be cured.
Right.
But until and unless that is done, it speaks volumes of the fact that the EC has not been considered in this context as an essential body, so to speak.
Right.
Because
So
as I mentioned,
as you guys have noted,
the activity.
An EI is a president's only made law. It just takes a couple of minutes and he can, make an exemption for them. But Dr. Sribo Kweku, let's get back to you and then get Bryce Simmons to get you to clarify a number of points. Was there validation before the register was used for the district assembly elections on the 17th of December? Dr. Sribo Kweku, you have suggested that even if you were to take the alternative that is being suggested by the CDD and other, players, there would be the need for a validation process. What law makes the validation mandatory? And question, was there validation before the district assembly elections? The register was used for the district assembly elections.
Thank you, Samson. If you listen to me when I did my delivery, what I said was that we will need to clean the register if we are to go by the old one. That's why we do that. And I'm saying that if we are to go by the old register, one, we will have to do the limited registration, which is legally mandatory. Then in addition, we will need to clean the register by doing the validation. In that case, we will need a new CI to do that. That's what I said.
So you are not saying that validation is mandatory, right?
Well, if we are to use the old register, then I told you that we have done a lot of research and we have come out with a paper on that. So what we are saying is that we want to compile a new register. If that is not possible, then the alternative would be to use the old register, which will include doing limited registration and do validation of the existing register.
Okay. My question is, you didn't do validation of this register, but you used it for the district assembly elections. The same voters whose names are on that register used it without the validation process. What's the problem?
Yeah, I think we are going back to our reason for comparing new voters register. We said that we have some few challenges on the current register, and we have said that there are a lot of people who have passed on and their names are on it. We shouldn't lose out the fact that tension in this level election cannot be compared with that of the general election. What somebody will go to court when it's the general election, the person will not go to court when it is this level election. So when it comes to general election, the tension in it means that we have to get everything right, so that we don't give room for people to exploit, for us to get into difficulties. Because, as we said, almost every election, general election that we have had in Ghana has been challenged. So we don't have to push into it. When we, as we know that if somebody is to take us on, we may be found wanting when certain issues are raised. That's why we are saying that we needed a new register so that there will be credibility. The credibility will be very high. Credible now, but we can get more credible one if you have to compare a new one. If the pandemic is not allowing that, and we have to use the old register, we can't do anything but to allow limited registration, in addition to it, to validate the current register, which was a demand a new CI.
Okay. What is the basis for the projection the EC makes that the situation might be over in 2 months? And I'm asking because if we take the example of where the disease was detected in Wuhan, it was detected in November 2019. We are in mid-April. In spite of the massive resources in China, Wuhan has not completely, or is not completely out of the woods yet. Last week, they attempted, to lift the restrictions. They had recorded a spike in the rates that they have. So if you take Wuhan as the standard and the example to measure the cycle of the disease, they started in November. Mid-April, they are not out yet. What is the basis of your projection that you started about a month ago and you should be out in the next 2 months?
If you remember, I said that we have been having a lot of consultation with health experts and other stakeholders. So these are some of the projections they are giving us.
Okay.
And that's what I'm saying, that in case that one fails, then we have to go by the options that others are saying, and these are also possible implications if you have to go by the other options. Now, I want to say that some of the people are saying that apart from the election day, the other days are not time bound. It's not the case. If you use 7 December as the election day, the law is clear that between 90 to 30 days to the election day, we should do nomination. So it's also time bound. The law also says that not less than 42 days to nomination, we should allow for transfer of vote. Not less than 42 days to election, we should allow for transfer of vote. So you hear that once the election day is fixed, other issues are also time bound. So you cannot rule out that apart from the election, the law allows you to do whatever. And all other things we have to follow. It's a process, not an activity. So it is difficult for you to eliminate some of the processes.
Interesting. Hold on for me. I'll get Bright Simmons to get back on a couple of the issues that you dealt with, and then we may take a break, and then after that we will go to answer the question, what if December 7 is disrupted by the pandemic? Let's have Bright Simmons canvass those points quickly, and then we can let you go, and then we go for a break. Yes, Bright.
Thank you. I think that Dr. Kweku misunderstands the point that is being made. Nobody is saying that registration of voters and granting the right to new people that have recently turned 18 or could not for some reason register in previous registration exercises is not important. When we say essential, to repeat, we are not using the colloquial meaning of essential. As this epidemic became a pandemic and has moved on and continued to evolve, these terms have acquired specific meanings. And the meaning around the essentiality of a particular service in these days is the degree to which you could modify it to conform to the current advisories that we have in this climate. You get my point? So it's not that don't make any effort to register people, and that if people are disenfranchised, there is no issue. It is that there are three issues. One, the way in which you can modify the process to conform to the current scientific understanding of the disease makes it essential or not essential. If you take that definition, then three issues arise. One, if you decide that you are not going to do a limited registration exercise, the constitutional provision in relation to registration is relatively lax. It says, as the EC might by law revise. Now, it does not compel you, for instance, as in the case of exhibition, nomination, and I explained that in my earlier discussion, that for some of the items in the chain, you have these very strict time-bound milestones to meet. Whereas registration, for whatever reason, was allowed to be somewhat lax. That is why, even though you are supposed to do continuous registration, you claim that because the political parties are not sufficiently cooperative, you won't do it, right? What does that mean? It means that if they had finished on on May 30th, if they had followed their current timeline by May 30th, from 1st June to December 7th, anybody who turned 18 and anybody who could not, go to the registration centers in the period that they are located for the exercise will have been disenfranchised, right? Because they cannot re-register, given that you don't have continuous registration. The reason why that is allowed is because registration is more lax. And if registration is more lax, and we have a global pandemic, and therefore we are having difficulty even allowing students to remain in school to learn, courts have been adjourned till May. If we've done all those things, then doesn't it mean that the thing in the electoral chain that is the most lax, the one that you have more discretion around, should be the one that you modify? What does that mean? It means, that's my point too. When you take the process, the time you have...
The adjournment of the courts you refer to is not set in stone, because depending on the developments and the lockdown,
the Chief Justice can change their mind.
There will be a new circular,
I agree.
Very obviously.
But I'm saying that the Chief Justice is using his her administrative powers to conform to the new reality,
right?
Because he has some discretion. The EC has a bit more discretion around registration. So it should use that discretion effectively to conform to the scientific understanding of the pandemic. That's the argument. Okay. The second point is that it's a matter of risk, degree and scale of risk. Everything we are doing has no absolutes. Like I said, if you finish limited registration on May 30th, you are going to have 6 months or so during which people are going to turn 18, they can't vote, right? So it's about degrees. If you decided even to forego limited registration entirely, 93% of qualified voters who have expressed a willingness based on your historical modeling to vote in elections will still vote. You get my point? So whereas if you don't do your exhibition, if you don't do your certification at district level, etc., if you don't do those things, you cannot have the election. So let's focus on those things. Third point, there is a sense that, at least I get a sense, that when we say the EC is independent, we misconstrue what independence means. Independence does not mean independence from accountability. It says independence to mean, or rather it construes independence to mean avoidance of collusion. So it's like your independent auditor must be independent of management. That does not mean that they have no accountability to the profession or the ethics of the profession.
All right.
Independence in that regard is about the fact that sufficient, as much as possible, the EC should not be colluding with other parties in order for its independence potentially to come under suspicion. Now I have to make the point that when you look at the way that electoral laws have been set up, there is a reason why we say the chief registration officer for a region should be a high court judge, and that we should have certification of registers done by magistrates and the rest, not by EC people. There is implied in that some degree of checks and balances.
Right.
The other critical point that we also have to make, and the reason why we are worried about the EC stance above everything else, is that given the way they've described the existing register, if they do not embark on a process of re-legitimation of that register, they will discredit the election.
All right.
If you have spent a lot of time continuing to say that this register is very bad, it dates from 2011, etc., etc., and we have put up evidence to show that it does not. The EC must now acknowledge that evidence that they initially showed, claiming that the registered dates from 2011 and was obsolete, is not true, because we've done some refurbishments to the system and the rest of it. And that legitimation process can only start when they make that their primary role, primary goal. So if at the same time that they are saying, oh, look, we are going to have multiple scenarios. In one scenario, we are planning for the epidemic to subside in 2 months. And in another scenario, maybe we use the old register. If they continue along that path, they suppress the possibility of spending enough time re-legitimating the register, which is very critical. My last point. Actually, my last 2 points. One, some people have said that because, and this goes to the validation points that Dr. Kweku has made, because STL contract has been terminated, even to use the old register, we need to go back to STL. That's not true. We've had almost 16 months now of the EC independently managing the existing register and the voting platform using its own means.
And the last point.
So if anything at all, you want to upgrade the system, you must go back to the owners of the intellectual property, HSB and Genki. It has nothing to do with STL, because the EC, as at this point, is independent of STL. That's a very important point. The other point goes to this issue around risk, again, around the reason why the pandemic allows certain things are more conformant than other things. If you take the South Korean voting scenario, how many days did they last? 1 day. If you want to do a mass registration, how long do you need? We are arguing that you don't need less than 70 days. Now, as you prolong a mass public gathering, because you have to do public gathering in 8,000 locations, aggregations, cross-mixing, you intensify the likelihood of spreading the virus.
They are saying they have bought PPEs and they intend to observe the social distancing rules.
That merely extends the timeline and then creates additional problems down the line, as I explained earlier on. So everything that we've explained means that the lower risk things that must be done must be time related. So if you are doing a limited registration, for instance, you don't have to necessarily do it. But if you have to do a limited registration, you can do it in your district offices. It can be limited in scope. That is more likely to reduce the risk of pandemic spread than to try and maintain the process.
Thank you. Now we quickly will have to terminate this part of the discussion and take a break and return to answer the question, what if the pandemic disrupts December 7? But before that, Professor Kwesi Prempeh, the EC says, even though the law allows it to do continuous registration, which the expectation of the law would have been that anybody turning 18 at any time should just walk into any EC office and register, they are unable to implement that now because the parties are unwilling. Because we are not in normal times, what do you think? Can they do something about this to make this operational?
Well, I mean, that argument has been made during normal times, right? So if they can't even do that in normal times, I think I'm having some difficulty trying to figure out how this works in abnormal times. I mean, I don't know the nature of the parties' argument. Why this cannot be done if in normal times, right? So it's a bit. I'm not particularly sure I get the argument the EC is making. Not that matter. Not the parties are making. But at least the EC can do limited registration. That one, the EC itself admits.
Yes.
That if it comes to shove, they can do limited registration with current registration. And that is a very important admission that the EC has made. That in fact, I'm happy that they have at least attempted that option. The impression I've been giving in the past, the door is totally closed. There is only one way. There's no option around new register. I'm happy that at least the EC concedes that it can live with this register with certain limited registration, some cleaning, and all of this. I think that is where I agree with Brad. This is where under these circumstances, it must spend its limited resources, including time, working towards.
All right. I hope every institution and all of us are learning, taking the lessons that the pandemic is teaching us to do the things that are necessary and not wait until there is trouble. The law says you should be able to walk to an EC office anytime and, you know, register once you turn 18, you are of sound mind. We haven't fixed that since the law was passed. 2016, I think. So what's our problem? Your last question to you, Dr. Kweku. Will the EC consider inviting an international panel of experts to assess the credibility and usability